Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is declare. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear declare used is to mean to say something in a serious, authoritative, or a formal manner. So as I think about this particular definition, my mind goes to law and to politics and sometimes these sort of formal announcements of maybe a new policy, a new rule, something of that nature. A second way, and a bit connected here, is to formally announce the start of something. With this definition, I think about the United States legislative branch and its ability to declare war. That is kind of the formal announcement of the start of a war. A third way we can use the verb declare is to mean to announce oneself as a candidate for a particular election. So sometimes people will say they are exploring, so they are considering, maybe they're talking to people to see could they have the chance of possibly winning an election. But then at some point they will formally announce. So I hope you're seeing that pattern here as we look at this verb. It's a pretty formal verb, a formal word to use. A fourth way you might hear declare used is in connection with international travel. So as you travel from one country into another, you might need to fill out a form, sort of announcing, right, that you have possession of certain items. Or when you're returning home, you might need to fill out a form indicating the things you bought and the things you're bringing back into your home country. You will hear this verb used in connection to those actions. You should know declare is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, all you need to do is drop the E and then add ing to form declaring. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, declare, right, ends in an R sound. That's a voiced sound. So our past tense ending is going to make a D sound. But we're not going to add an extra syllable as we say it. It should sound like this: declared, declared. Okay. You'll be happy to know there are not any phrasal verbs that we need to study with this particular verb. So that will allow us to focus on practicing some sentences in the past perfect and the simple future today. Let's start with the past perfect. We use this verb tense to note that a particular action was completed at some point in the past, maybe before a certain date or time, or before another action. The past perfect has two P's, and I like this to help my students remember we need two parts to make the verb tense. So we're going to use the past form of have, which is had, and then we use the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at an affirmative example. The governor had declared a state of emergency prior to the river cresting above flood stage. It seems everywhere we look now, there's some horrible flooding in different areas of the world. Just this week in the United States, really bad flooding in the state of Mississippi. I can't remember exactly where I read this example sentence, though, and which flood, unfortunately, it's connected to. But here we are talking about a head of state sort of formally announcing there is an emergency. This has some legal connections as to what happens or what funds are available to help in sort of the most immediate circumstances. So, but notice here the important part, right? We see subject, had, and then the participle form of our verb. To make a negative past perfect sentence, my structure will be subject, had, then not, then the participle. You can see that in the example here. The student hadn't declared a major before she started her sophomore year. This is another area where you will hear this verb declare used. So what it generally means is someone is formally announcing, maybe formally filling out a form to state, this is what I intend to study when I am in college. To make a yes or no question in the past perfect, you start with had, then you have your subject, then the participle form of the verb. Here's another example. Had the candidate declared before the scandal broke? This is something very common in American politics. A lot of our political candidates will have different things that maybe they were trying to hide from the general public, but that eventually come out. So here we're wanting to know which event happened first. Now let's take a look at the simple future. Today we're going to focus on using will. There are a few different ways to talk about the future, but it's really common to hear will used in regards to promises and predictions. Sometimes you'll hear people use it to talk about their plans as well. The nice thing about this form of the simple future is that it's going to stay the same no matter what our subject is. So our sentence will have a subject in the affirmative here, then we'll use will, then we'll use the base verb. You can see that in my example. The UK foreign minister will declare China an official security threat this week. I've borrowed another sentence from some news articles I had recently read. So that was actually used, I think, even in a headline, maybe a briefer form of that. But if you want to make a negative simple future sentence, again, our structure will be to start with our subject, then will not, then the base verb. You might also hear people form a contraction with will not, won't. You can see that in my example here. The candidate won't declare defeat. So this, unfortunately, might be a prediction. This is, I would say, a major problem we're having in the United States. Some people not admitting or not kind of formally acknowledging that they have lost a particular election. Now, let's take a look at a yes or no question. To do this in the simple future, we start with will, then we have our subject, then the base verb. Here's another example. Will a judge declare the agreement to be invalid? Right? So here maybe we're asking someone to make a prediction about what they think a judge will rule in regards to a particular matter. Now let's take a moment to look at some words in a phrase related to our verb declare. And the first word we're going to look at is the noun form of this word. It's declaration. Declaration. Okay. This noun can be used in a couple different ways, just like our verb. One way you hear declaration used is to refer to some formal statement or formal announcement. The way I think of it most commonly with this definition, again, it's sort of connected to U.S. history. My example sentence, the Declaration of Independence was adopted on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia. So this was very much a formal announcement indicating the United States would be its own country, declaring it independent of Great Britain. Another way we use the noun declaration is to in regards to a listing of goods, property, income. Again, this tends to come up when people are traveling from one country into another. And so this list might be possibly, depending on the quantity of goods, subject to tax. An example of this might be, you must complete CBP Declaration Form 6059B when entering the U.S. So again, sounds very formal. You might see it on different things connected to your flight. People might suggest you need to complete certain paperwork before entering the country. Another related word is the adjective declarable. Again, this connects back to that international travel and do we have goods that we're bringing in to a particular place that might be needed to be and formally announced as being subject to taxation. So this adjective describes things. So an example of this might be, are these souvenirs declarable? Right? So maybe someone's asking their friend, it's their first time traveling outside of a particular country, and they want to know, do I need to write this down? Another related adjective you might hear, especially if you're studying grammar, is declarative. This describes something sort of related to or connected to a declaration, a statement. So an example of how maybe you've heard a teacher say something like this: today we're going to practice writing declarative statements. So this would be different than writing interrogatory or interrogative questions. So that if it helps you to know, like, of course you would practice writing those. No, that's what we're trying to differentiate, a question versus a statement. The last thing I'll leave you with today is a phrase, to declare bankruptcy. Again, as I've pointed out a couple times, this is a pretty formal verb. So this particular phrase is used in a legal way. So someone is formally notifying, filing paperwork with a court to indicate they are not able to pay their debts, pay companies, businesses, maybe the government, what they owe those particular entities. So an example of this might be, the company declared bankruptcy in an attempt to avoid paying the judgment. So this is something that is also becoming, I would say, more and more common, where large corporations try and avoid having to pay large settlements by using this legal process to say, we don't have the cash to pay our debts. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.